You know, they always tell you that family is everything. But that's just a damn lie. You don't know true betrayal until you realize that the people who are supposed to love you, care for you, will be the first ones to stab you in the back. My name is Dennis, and I've spent my entire life working for everyone around me, especially my daughter Caitlin. But the day she said the words that shattered my world, I knew something had to change. I was sitting in my living room that night just finishing up dinner. The house felt emptier than usual, too quiet. Ellen had passed 2 years ago, but sometimes it felt like the silence inside these walls was still mourning her. Caitlin had been away on a business trip, but she always called to check in, always asking if I needed anything, pretending like she cared. I picked up the phone when it buzzed, Caitlin's name lighting up the screen. "Hey, Dad, how are you doing?" she asked, trying to sound like everything was fine. "I'm all right, sweetheart," I said, keeping my tone light. "Just eating some leftovers. How's the conference going?" Her voice sounded strained, like she was rushing. "Same old stuff. Long meetings, but we should talk about you. You know, we're a little worried." Worried? After all these years, that word hit me wrong. I'd spent my life worrying about her, and now she was worried about me. I felt a cold pit in my stomach, but I didn't think much of it. Not until I heard something I wasn't supposed to. Her phone must have slipped because I heard muffled voices in the background. My daughter, Caitlin, the woman I'd raised, was talking to her husband, Jeremy. I didn't mean to listen in, but their words hit me like a punch to the gut. "You see how he's deteriorating." Caitlin's voice was colder now, calculating. "He forgot to turn off the stove yesterday. What if he burns the house down?" Jeremy chuckled. "It's time for a nursing home, Caitlin. He's becoming a burden. The house is worth almost $1 million now. We could sell it, put him somewhere decent, not too expensive, and then get that house in Boulder we've been looking at." I froze, my hand gripped tight around the phone. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My daughter, my flesh and blood, was calling me a burden. And they were already planning to sell my house, the very house I'd built from nothing. Caitlin laughed again, but this time there was nothing warm in it. "God, Jeremy, you should have seen him tonight. He's so grateful just to hear from me. He has no idea what we're planning." Something inside me snapped. I had given everything to make sure she had the best, yet here she was, plotting my downfall. And the worst part, I had no idea. They had already decided my future, as if I was just a piece of property to be discarded. But I wasn't going to let them get away with it. No, I was going to take everything back, everything they thought they could steal from me. And trust me, what happened next will leave you speechless. But if you want to know how I turned the tables, how I made them regret every word, you'll have to stick around. Don't forget to subscribe, because this is just the beginning and you won't want to miss a single part of what happens next. The silence in the house was unbearable. It was as if the walls themselves had heard Caitlin's words and now stood witness to my pain. I sat there, holding the phone for what felt like hours, but in reality it was just a few seconds. That silence, so deafening, reminded me of all the years I'd spent working for her, trying to give her the best life possible. All that effort, all the sacrifices, and this was how it ended. I had been nothing more than a stepping stone for their dreams. But not anymore. I hung up the phone without saying a word. What was there to say? Caitlin had already made her decision, and so had I. I didn't sleep much that night. The anger was like fire in my chest, burning away all the years of denial. How could she do this, after everything? I had given up my own happiness to make sure she had everything she wanted: private tutors, expensive vacations, her dream wedding. I had sacrificed my own future for hers, and this was how she repaid me. The next morning, I woke up with a sense of clarity I hadn't felt in years. I wasn't some helpless old man. I wasn't a burden, and I sure as hell wasn't going to let anyone treat me like one. I'd been a doormat for far too long, but not anymore. Caitlin and Jeremy were about to learn that I was done playing the fool. I spent the entire day going through my old papers, everything I had kept, every receipt, every legal document. I'd spent hours pulling together everything I could find: mortgage statements, bank records, the deeds to the house. Hell, I even found the original papers from the down payment on this place, the one I had worked so damn hard for. It was like pulling together a war chest. I was ready for war. That afternoon, I drove down to my lawyer's office. I'd been meaning to call Todd for years. Hell, Ellen had suggested we go over our will a while back, but I never did. Now, it felt like the only thing that mattered. He was a no-nonsense kind of guy, the kind of lawyer who didn't waste your time with pleasantries. I needed someone who could help me make the kind of impact I needed to make sure Caitlin and Jeremy understood they had messed with the wrong man. As I sat across from him in his small office, I could feel the weight of the moment. This was it. This was the first step in taking control back. "So, what can I do for you today, Roy?" Todd asked, looking at me from across his desk. He always called me Roy for some reason. Maybe it was the formality, maybe it was just his way of being professional. "It's Dennis, Todd," I corrected him. "I need to do something about my daughter and her husband. I need to make sure they never think they can take advantage of me again." Todd leaned back in his chair, looking at me like he'd seen this before, but that didn't make me feel any less serious. "What's going on, Dennis?" I slid the papers across the desk, and as Todd began to skim through the mortgage documents, the house deeds, and bank records, I felt a sense of satisfaction, like I was preparing for battle. "I need you to help me make sure Caitlin and Jeremy never get their hands on this house. I want to make it clear that I'm not just some old man they can push around." Todd didn't blink, didn't hesitate. He simply nodded, pushing the papers back toward me. "You're serious about this, huh?" "Dead serious," I said. "And I need you to draw up the documents to make sure they don't get a dime from me. No inheritance, no house, nothing. I want it all in my hands, and I want them to know that they've lost." Todd sat there quietly for a moment, then scribbled something down on his notepad. "We can make that happen, Dennis. But let's be clear, once this is done, there's no going back. Are you sure this is the route you want to take?" I leaned forward, feeling the fire inside me flare up again. "It's the only route I'll take. I've been too generous with them, too damn forgiving. It's time to show them that I'm not someone to mess with." By the time I left Todd's office, the pieces of my plan were starting to come together. I knew it wouldn't be easy. Caitlin and Jeremy weren't going to just roll over, but I was done being their fool. I was ready to make them understand the consequences of their actions. That night, as I sat in the quiet of my home, I thought back to the house, every nail, every brick. I had built it with my own 2 hands, and I wasn't about to let anyone take it away. Not Caitlin, not Jeremy. They were going to regret the day they ever underestimated me. And when the time came to confront them, when they saw the full extent of what I'd done, they would realize that there was no going back. But trust me, the fun was just beginning. If you want to know how they reacted when they found out what I was doing, what happened when Caitlin and Jeremy saw the plan unfold, you'll need to stick around. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button, because you're going to want to hear how everything changed. The days that followed felt like a whirlwind. I couldn't stop thinking about what I had started. I'd been planning this for years without even realizing it. The anger had been brewing inside me for far too long, and now it was finally spilling out, filling every corner of my mind. Caitlin had always been a good daughter, at least that's what I kept telling myself. I had convinced myself for so long that the sacrifices I made for her were worth it. I had built a life for her, given her everything she could ever want, but she couldn't see it. And that's what hurt the most. She couldn't see the man who had worked tirelessly, the father who had given up his own comfort just to see her succeed. Instead, all she saw was a house to sell and an old man to get rid of. I spent the next few days making the necessary calls, getting the paperwork in order. Todd had been working behind the scenes, drafting everything to make sure that when the time came, Caitlin and Jeremy would find out just how little control they had left. I wasn't just going to cut them off from the house. No, I wanted them to understand the consequences of their betrayal. I wasn't going to make it easy for them to take what they thought was theirs. One evening, as I was reviewing the documents one last time, I heard a knock at the door. I wasn't expecting anyone, but when I opened it, there stood Caitlin. She looked a little flustered, as if she had been rushing to get here. Her eyes darted around the house, taking in every detail. The place had been in need of repairs for years, but now, with the freedom of not having to send her money every month, I was starting to fix things. The porch had been repainted, the kitchen had new tiles, and I had just replaced the old fridge. It felt like a home again. "Dad," Caitlin said, her voice stiff but polite, "I need to talk to you. Is now a good time?" I could already tell something was off. She wasn't acting like herself. Her usual sweetness was gone, replaced with a kind of coldness I hadn't seen before. I stepped aside to let her in, my mind already racing. I knew what this was about. I had been expecting this. "Of course," I said, my tone calm, betraying none of the storm raging inside me. "What's on your mind?" She hesitated for a moment, looking around the room before taking a seat on the couch. "I've been thinking, and I know things have been tense between us lately," she began, her words rehearsed. "Jeremy and I are just trying to do what's best for you, Dad. We're worried. You're getting older, and we just want to make sure you're taken care of." The nerve. After everything, after hearing her and Jeremy plan to send me away to a nursing home, she thought she could just waltz in here and play the concerned daughter. She didn't even have the decency to look me in the eye. "I'm fine, Caitlin," I said, keeping my voice steady. "I've been taking care of myself just fine, thank you very much." Her face faltered for just a moment. I could see her trying to hold it together, trying to maintain the mask of concern. But it wasn't going to work. Not this time. "You don't understand, Dad," she said, her voice rising slightly. "Jeremy and I are just trying to help. You don't need all this space. We're just trying to make things easier for you, and for us." She added that last part quickly, as if realizing she had just revealed too much. I couldn't help but smile. Oh, she had no idea how much I already knew. "You think you're helping?" I asked, my voice quiet but firm. "Let me tell you something, Caitlin. You and Jeremy think I'm just some old man you can push around. But you're wrong. This house, this life isn't yours to take. I've given enough. I've sacrificed too much. And it's over." Her eyes widened, a mixture of confusion and disbelief crossing her face. "What do you mean, Dad? What are you saying?" "I'm saying I'm done," I said, standing up from the chair and walking toward the door. "Done playing your game. Done being your personal bank account. Done being your pawn. You and Jeremy can forget about this house. You can forget about everything I've given you." She stood up now, a mix of anger and panic rising in her voice. "What are you talking about? Dad, this is crazy. You can't do this." "Oh, but I can," I said calmly, my eyes locking onto hers. "You and Jeremy are about to learn a very important lesson. Never underestimate me." I walked past her, opening the door. "It's time for you to go. I'm not interested in your apologies or your false concern. I want you to remember this moment. The moment you thought you could take everything from me and get away with it." She stood frozen in the doorway, her face a mixture of anger and confusion. But I could see the realization starting to sink in. Caitlin was starting to understand just how serious I was. Before she could say anything else, I gave her one final look and slammed the door shut. And then I sat down. I could feel the weight of the decision settle on me, but for the first time in years I felt lighter. I was no longer playing by their rules. I was in control. But Caitlin and Jeremy weren't going to just walk away. They were about to learn what it meant to betray me, and I was ready to make them regret it. If you want to know how they reacted when they realized I wasn't bluffing, and what I did next to make sure they never messed with me again, stick around. And hey, make sure you hit that subscribe button, because trust me, you're going to want to hear the rest of this. It didn't take long for the storm to hit. The next morning I woke up to the sound of my phone buzzing nonstop. At first I ignored it. It was Caitlin, I knew that much. I could already imagine her trying to call me, trying to apologize, trying to figure out how to fix the mess she'd created. But I wasn't interested in hearing it. Not anymore. By noon, the buzzing had turned into a constant reminder of how desperate she was getting. The calls, the text messages, all begging for my attention. I finally picked up, ready for whatever words she thought could change my mind. "Dad, please," her voice came through the phone, tight and frantic. "What's going on? What do you mean you're done? Why are you doing this?" I leaned back in my chair, a grin tugging at the corner of my lips. She sounded completely lost, and it felt good. Good to finally have the upper hand. Good to be the one holding the cards for once. "I mean exactly what I said, Caitlin," I replied, my voice steady. "This house isn't yours to take. I've worked my whole life for it, and you've done nothing but take from me. You and Jeremy think you can just walk all over me because I'm getting older. Well, guess what? I'm not your personal ATM anymore. I'm done." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. I could almost hear the gears turning in her head, trying to figure out how to get control of the situation again. Finally, she spoke, but her voice was different, tighter, more calculated. "Dad, you're making a mistake. We were just trying to help you. We care about you," she said, her voice sweet but laced with desperation. "But you don't understand. We need the house. This is the only way we can move forward. Please don't do this." I laughed, but it wasn't a laugh of amusement. It was a laugh of pure disbelief. "You're unbelievable. You and Jeremy think I don't know what you're doing. You think you can buy me off with your fake concern and empty words. You've shown me your true colors, Caitlin, and now it's my turn to show you mine." There was silence on the other end of the line. I could almost see her face, shocked, angry, and yes, a little scared. Good, she should be. She had no idea what was coming. "I'm not doing this to be cruel," I continued, the weight of every word sinking in. "I'm doing this because you need to learn that there are consequences to treating people like this, especially your own family. You can't just take, and think there won't be a price to pay." I ended the call before she could say anything else, and as I sat back in my chair, I felt a wave of satisfaction. This was the moment I had taken control of my life again. But Caitlin and Jeremy weren't going to give up that easily. I knew that. They had too much to lose now that I had cut them off, and I could see it in the messages that flooded my phone for the rest of the day. But the best part, they weren't just desperate for money, they were desperate for the house. They thought they could win. Well, they hadn't seen anything yet. The next day, I received a letter in the mail. It was from a law firm I didn't recognize, but it wasn't hard to guess who had sent it. Jeremy, of course. He was always the one behind the scenes, pulling the strings, thinking he could outsmart me. I opened the letter slowly, savoring the anticipation. "Dear Mr. Flores," the letter began. "We represent Caitlin and Jeremy last name, and we are writing to inform you that they are prepared to take legal action regarding the ownership of the property located at address. It has come to our attention that you are in possession of documents that may be in violation of certain agreements made during the purchase of the property. Our clients request that you cease any further actions regarding this matter and return the full rights to the property immediately. Failure to comply will result in legal proceedings." I set the letter down with a small smile. They were playing their hand, and now it was my turn. I wasn't about to let them intimidate me with threats. It was cute, really. Caitlin and Jeremy thought they could scare me into backing down, but I wasn't going to be bullied, not anymore. I took the letter, folded it neatly, and set it aside. I had been preparing for this. I knew they would come after me legally. They didn't think I had the guts to fight back, but I was ready. And when they found out just how deep I had dug, they'd realize just how wrong they were. Later that night, I called Todd, my lawyer. I could hear the surprise in his voice when I told him I needed him to start drafting documents for a counterclaim. I wasn't just going to roll over and let them take what was mine. "Dennis," Todd said carefully, "you're sure about this? Once you go down this road, there's no turning back. I'm sure, I said firmly. I'm done being a doormat. It's time for Caitlin and Jeremy to learn a lesson they'll never forget. The next morning, I dropped the documents off at Todd's office. And then, for the first time in years, I felt like I could breathe again. The weight was lifting. I had taken back control, and I wasn't about to let anyone take it from me again. That afternoon, Caitlin called once more, but this time she didn't try to play nice. "Dad," her voice was clipped sharp, "if you don't fix this, I'm going to make sure you never see your grandchildren again. You'll be cut out of our lives completely." I didn't flinch. "Go ahead," I said, my voice calm. "That's your choice, Caitlin, but just remember you made this decision, not me." I hung up, and as I sat there, I felt something I hadn't felt in years: peace. But Caitlin and Jeremy were far from done. They were about to find out just how far I was willing to go. And believe me, they hadn't seen the worst of it yet. If you want to know what happened next, how I made sure they would regret their actions, hit that subscribe button and stick around. You won't want to miss how this all ends. The days following the letter were a blur of paperwork, phone calls, and relentless pressure from Caitlin and Jeremy. They were desperate now, desperate to get back control, desperate to intimidate me, desperate to get what they thought was rightfully theirs. But as far as I was concerned, they were just digging their own graves. It wasn't just the legal threats that were coming my way. The phone calls were coming in every hour now, each one more frantic than the last. I ignored them all. There was nothing left for me to say to them. They had made their choice, and now it was time for me to show them the cost of that choice. But Caitlin wasn't done yet. Oh no, she wasn't just going to let things slip by without one final attempt to sway me. One evening, just as the sun was setting, my phone buzzed again. I glanced at it, Caitlin's name again. I was about to ignore it like I had all the others, but then I paused. Something told me I should pick up this time. Maybe it was the desperation in her voice the last time, or maybe it was just that I was ready for whatever came next. "Dad," she said, and I could hear the urgency in her voice. "We need to talk. I know things have been crazy, but I'm not going to lose you over this." I leaned back in my chair, folding my arms. This was it. I'd been waiting for this moment, the moment when she would finally realize the mistake she'd made. "Caitlin," I began, my voice measured, "it's too late for that. You had your chance. You chose to treat me like a burden, like I didn't matter. You wanted to sell the house I built, the house I worked for every single day, and now you want to play the concerned daughter. I've heard enough." She fell silent for a moment, but I could hear her breathing on the other end. "I didn't mean it that way, Dad. Please," she pleaded, her voice breaking. "I was just trying to help. Jeremy and I were just thinking about your future, about what's best for you. We never wanted to hurt you." I let out a slow breath, feeling the anger begin to bubble up again. "You wanted to hurt me. Don't lie. You thought you could sell me off, sell the house, and live your life like I was never even here. You and Jeremy made that decision for me without even asking what I wanted." "I'm sorry," she said softly, and I could tell it was genuine. But the apology was too little, too late. The damage had been done. But that wasn't the end of it. Oh no, the real kicker came just a few minutes later. "Dad," Caitlin said, and I could hear something different in her voice this time. "I'm pregnant." The words hung in the air for a moment, and I could feel my chest tighten. She didn't say anything more. She didn't need to. I knew exactly what she was trying to do. It was a classic move. The emotional card. The "I'm pregnant, so forgive me" card. She was trying to manipulate me, trying to make me soften up. She knew I loved her, and now she was using that love against me. But it didn't work, not this time. "You think this changes anything?" I said, my voice as cold as ice. "You think that throwing a pregnancy in my face is going to make me forget how you treated me, how you tried to sell me off like I was some kind of burden? No, that's not how this works, Caitlin." I could hear her choke back a sob. "I'm sorry, Dad. I don't know what else to say." "You've said enough," I told her. Now you're going to have to live with the consequences of your actions. I hung up the phone, the weight of her words lingering in the silence, but I wasn't swayed. This wasn't about her pregnancy. This wasn't about me feeling guilty or giving in. This was about principle, about making her realize that actions have consequences. I wasn't the man I used to be, the man who would just take it all in silence. No more. The next day, I walked into Todd's office. I could tell by the look on his face that he knew something was up. He had been waiting for this moment, the moment I fully committed to taking back control. "Everything's in place," Todd said, looking at me seriously. "I've got the counterclaim ready and I've filed the paperwork with the court. Caitlin and Jeremy will be served soon." I nodded, the weight of the decision sitting heavily on my chest, but I knew it was the right thing to do. This wasn't about revenge. This was about standing up for myself. It was about showing Caitlin and Jeremy that they couldn't just walk all over me anymore. "Do it," I said to Todd. "Let's make sure they understand exactly what they're up against." He didn't hesitate. "You've made your move. Now we'll let the court decide. But once this is filed, there's no going back. They'll have to face the consequences of what they've done." I stood up, feeling a strange sense of peace settle over me. I was finally in control. I had done everything I could to prepare, to make sure that no matter what happened next, I wouldn't back down. That night I sat in my living room, staring out the window as the first stars appeared in the night sky. I thought about Caitlin and Jeremy, about their empty threats, about their manipulation, and I thought about what was to come. Caitlin thought she could use her pregnancy to soften me, to make me back down, but she didn't know me anymore. She didn't know the man I had become, and now she was going to learn the hard way. If you want to know how Caitlin and Jeremy reacted when they realized they had underestimated me, how the legal battle turned in my favor, stick around. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button, because trust me, this story is far from over. The days after I filed the counterclaim passed slowly, but the anticipation made them feel like weeks. I knew Caitlin and Jeremy were scrambling, trying to figure out how to react. They had expected me to give in, to back down like I always had before. But they didn't understand. I wasn't the same man anymore, and I had no intention of letting them win this time. The phone calls stopped for a while. At first, I thought maybe they had realized how serious I was. Maybe they were giving me space to make my move. But then, one morning, I woke up to an email notification. It was from Caitlin. "Dad, we need to talk. We're coming over to the house today. Please don't do anything you'll regret." I read it through twice, trying to keep my emotions in check. This was the moment I had been waiting for, the moment when they finally realized that they had lost. They thought they could get to me with guilt, with threats, with manipulation. But they hadn't seen my resolve yet. They didn't know how far I was willing to go. I didn't respond to the email. I didn't need to. Instead, I called Todd. "Dennis," Todd answered on the second ring. "What's up?" "I just got an email from Caitlin," I said, keeping my voice calm. "She wants to talk. They're coming over today." Todd was quiet for a moment. "Are you sure you want to meet with them? I'm telling you, once you engage, there's no going back." "I know," I replied, "but I need them to see me. I need them to see that I'm not backing down." Todd paused, and then with a sigh he spoke. "All right, Dennis, but remember, you've got the upper hand now. Don't let them pull you back into their games." I ended the call and sat there for a moment, thinking about what was coming. Caitlin and Jeremy were about to show up at my door, probably full of empty apologies and promises of how things could go back to normal. But the problem was, I wasn't interested in normal anymore. I was done with normal. I could hear the rumble of their car in the driveway before I saw them. Caitlin and Jeremy had arrived. I stood up, straightening my shirt, and walked to the door, ready for whatever was coming next. When I opened the door, Caitlin was standing there, looking almost like her old self, except there was something different in her eyes. The mask of concern was gone. There was no sweetness, no fake apology. There was just anger and desperation. "Dad, we need to talk," she said, her voice tight. "This has gone too far. You don't need to do this. You can still fix this. We can fix this." Jeremy stood behind her, his arms crossed, his expression unreadable. He looked like a man who had already lost the battle, but he wasn't ready to admit it yet. I could see the frustration in his eyes. He wanted to make me cave, to make me feel guilty, but I wasn't having it. "I don't think there's anything to fix, Caitlin," I said, my voice cold. "You've already made your decision, and now I'm making mine." She took a step forward, trying to close the distance between us. "Please, Dad, you don't get it. This is your home, your legacy. We're just trying to help you. We want to make sure you're taken care of. But we can't do that if you're making these choices. This house isn't just a house, it's everything." I shook my head. "No, Caitlin, this house is everything to me. It's everything I've worked for. It's a symbol of everything I've done for you and for Jeremy. But I'm done being your stepping stone. I'm done being your ATM. I'm done being your pawn, and you need to understand that." She opened her mouth to argue, but I cut her off. "Don't bother, Caitlin. I'm done listening to your excuses. I've heard them all before. And now I'm going to make sure you understand that the consequences of your actions are real." Jeremy stepped forward then, trying to take control of the situation. "You don't know what you're doing, old man," he spat, his tone threatening. "You can't just tear apart everything we've worked for. We're going to get that house back. You'll see, you won't win this fight." I looked him dead in the eye, my voice steady but filled with fury. "You want this house, Jeremy? Fine, but you're going to have to fight for it. And let me tell you something, you're not going to win." Caitlin's face was pale now. She was starting to see the weight of what I was saying, but she wasn't ready to give up. Not yet. "You can't do this," she said, her voice wavering. "This isn't how things are supposed to go, Dad. We're family. We've always been family." I stared at her, the sting of her betrayal still fresh in my chest. "You stopped being my family the moment you decided to sell me off, Caitlin. The moment you thought I was disposable. That's when you stopped being my family." There was a long silence, and for the first time since this whole nightmare started, I saw Caitlin's resolve falter. She didn't know how to fight back against this. She didn't know how to win when I had already seen through her games. And for the first time I could see the fear in her eyes. Fear that I wouldn't back down. Fear that she had lost. "Goodbye, Caitlin," I said softly, turning to walk away. "And don't bother coming back until you've figured out how to respect me." I heard her call my name behind me, but I didn't turn around. I had made my decision. The house, the money, it wasn't worth anything if it meant losing my dignity, if it meant losing myself. And as long as I still had that, I had won. The door closed behind me, the weight of the past few weeks settling around me. This was just the beginning. Caitlin and Jeremy were going to fight me, but they didn't know how deep my resolve ran. They didn't know how far I was willing to go. And they would soon find out. But if you want to know what happens when Caitlin and Jeremy realize they've lost, and how I turned their own game against them, stick around. Don't forget to subscribe. You won't want to miss the end of this story. The days that followed Caitlin's visit were oddly quiet. For the first time in what felt like forever, I had peace. The constant barrage of phone calls, the manipulative messages, suddenly, they all stopped. I was beginning to think that Caitlin and Jeremy had finally accepted the reality of the situation. But I was wrong. It was a week later when I received another letter in the mail. I wasn't surprised to see it was from their lawyer. At this point, I had expected it. I opened it slowly, almost savoring the anticipation of whatever new move they would try to make. "Dear Mr. Flores," the letter began, formal and cold as usual. "This letter is to inform you that our clients, Caitlin and Jeremy last name, are prepared to escalate matters further if a resolution is not reached immediately. You are advised to cease any and all actions regarding the ownership of the property at address, or we will pursue legal action for fraud and coercion. Our clients are prepared to take this to court, where we believe we will prevail. Your continued actions will have severe legal and financial consequences." I couldn't help but smile. They were trying to scare me, trying to threaten me into backing down. But what they didn't understand was that I had already seen their cards. I knew exactly how they played, and I wasn't going to fold. The next day I called Todd. "We're going to court, Todd. It's time to show them I'm not backing down." He was quiet for a moment. "I figured as much. But Dennis, are you sure? Once this goes to court, there's no turning back. It's going to get messy." "I've already made my choice," I said firmly. "This is bigger than just the house. This is about respect, about showing them that I'm not a fool." Todd sighed, probably knowing how stubborn I could be. "All right, let's prepare. I'll get everything in motion and we'll hit them hard. But you need to be ready for what comes next. It's going to get ugly." "I've been ready," I said. "They think they can bully me. They've underestimated me. It's time they found out who they're really dealing with." The legal battle had begun. And this time, it wasn't just about the house. It was about everything. It was about making Caitlin and Jeremy understand that they couldn't just take from me, couldn't just discard me when I was no longer useful. This was going to be a lesson they wouldn't soon forget. As the days passed, I kept myself busy. I knew the fight wasn't going to be easy, but I had been preparing for this moment for years. Every time I looked around my home, every piece of furniture, every room, every crack in the wall, those were the marks of my hard work, my sacrifices. And I wasn't about to let anyone take that from me without a fight. Then, a few days later, Caitlin showed up at my door again. This time, she was alone. She looked different. Her usual defiance was replaced with something softer, something more vulnerable. For a moment, I almost felt pity for her. But then she spoke, and I remembered why I was doing this. "Dad," she said, her voice shaking, "we've been talking, Jeremy and I, and we realize now that we've made a mistake. I've made a mistake. I never meant for things to get so out of control. We never wanted to hurt you." I stood there for a moment, staring at her. This was what I had been waiting for, her acknowledgement of what she had done. But it wasn't enough, not after everything. "You can't just apologize and make this go away, Caitlin," I said quietly. "What you did, what you and Jeremy did, wasn't just a mistake. You thought I was disposable, that I was something to be sold off for your convenience." Tears welled up in her eyes, and for a brief moment, I almost regretted not being able to forgive her. But I had learned too much over the past few weeks. I had learned that the only way to win back my dignity was to stand firm, and that meant not giving in to her apologies, not letting her use my love for her as a tool for manipulation. "I've heard enough," I said, my voice steady, almost cold. "You and Jeremy thought you could play me, but now it's my turn." She opened her mouth to speak, but I held up my hand, stopping her. "You don't get to walk in here and expect everything to just go back to normal. This isn't a conversation about forgiveness. This is about making sure you understand that there are consequences for your actions." Her face twisted with confusion, but I wasn't going to explain myself any further. I had already made my point. She had already heard the truth, and now she had to live with it. "I'm done with the games, Caitlin," I said. "And I'm done with the false promises. We'll see you in court. I'll make sure you and Jeremy understand exactly what happens when you try to take advantage of someone who's done nothing but give." She stood there for a moment, completely still, and I could see the realization beginning to sink in. She wasn't going to win, not this time, and not with me. With that, I closed the door softly behind her. The next few days were filled with preparation. Todd and I were building our case. Caitlin and Jeremy didn't know it yet, but they were already losing. The documents were in order, and every piece of evidence pointed in my favor. I had spent years building a life, a legacy, and I wasn't going to let them tear it down over their greed. When the day came for the court hearing, I stood tall. This was my fight. This was my moment. As we entered the courtroom, I could feel Caitlin's eyes on me. She looked different now, defeated. She and Jeremy both looked like they had already lost, and I hadn't even said a word yet. But when the judge called the court to order, I knew this was it. This was the moment I would finally get the justice I deserved. And Caitlin and Jeremy would finally understand. You don't mess with a man who's got nothing left to lose. If you want to know how this battle ends, how I made sure Caitlin and Jeremy lost everything they thought they were entitled to, you'll need to stay tuned. And don't forget to subscribe. This fight is far from over. The courtroom was cold. The air was thick with tension, and I could feel every set of eyes on me. I had been through tough situations before. Hell, I had worked in some of the roughest neighborhoods and dealt with some of the worst kinds of people. But this was different. This was my family. The people I had worked my whole life for. The people I thought I could trust. Caitlin and Jeremy were sitting across from me, their lawyer beside them, looking as smug as ever. Jeremy kept glancing at Caitlin, whispering something in her ear every few seconds, but I didn't care. I had already made my decision. They weren't going to win. Not this time. The judge, a no-nonsense woman who had probably seen more than her fair share of family disputes, looked down at the documents in front of her. The court was silent, except for the sound of her pen as she made notes on a legal pad. I could almost feel the weight of the decision she would make hanging in the air. "You may proceed," the judge finally said, her voice clear and commanding. Todd, my lawyer, stood up and walked to the front of the courtroom, his steps steady and confident. I had been working with him for weeks now, and I could see the preparation in his every move. He wasn't going to let Caitlin and Jeremy get away with what they'd done. Todd started presenting the evidence. Everything from the documents I had kept over the years to the conversations Caitlin and Jeremy had had about selling the house. I didn't need to say much. Todd was doing most of the talking, but it was clear from the evidence alone that Caitlin and Jeremy had crossed a line. They thought I was a fool, but I was. I had all the proof I needed to show that they had tried to take advantage of me, to treat me like a means to an end. As Todd went on, Caitlin's face grew paler. I could see the panic setting in. She hadn't expected things to go this way. She hadn't expected me to fight back. Jeremy, on the other hand, sat there with clenched fists, trying to maintain control, but I could see the frustration building in him. They were losing, and they both knew it. Then the judge spoke again, her voice cutting through the tension in the room. "Mr. Flores," she said, turning her gaze toward me, "you have not spoken in this case yet. Would you like to add anything?" I stood up, my heart pounding in my chest. I had been waiting for this moment, the moment when I could finally speak my truth. I cleared my throat and turned toward Caitlin and Jeremy. "You know, it's funny," I began, my voice steady and firm. "For years I thought I was doing the right thing. I thought I was being a good father, a good husband, a good provider. I gave everything I had to make sure my daughter had the life I never had. I worked long hours, sacrificed my own dreams just to see her succeed. And what did I get in return?" I paused for a moment, letting the question hang in the air. Caitlin didn't look at me, but I could feel her shifting in her seat. Jeremy had his arms crossed, still trying to look calm, but I could see the cracks in his composure. "I got betrayed," I continued. "I got used, and for what? A house, a property, money. You didn't care about me. You never cared about what I needed. You didn't care about anything except what you could get from me." I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of my words sink in. This was my moment to make sure they knew that I wasn't just fighting for the house. I was fighting for my dignity, for my respect. "And you want to know what really hurts?" I said, my voice quieter now. "The fact that you didn't even think twice about it. The fact that you just decided that I wasn't worth anything anymore, that I was just a burden. You didn't even have the decency to ask me how I felt." I could see Caitlin's face now, her eyes starting to fill with tears, but I wasn't finished yet. I didn't deserve this. I didn't deserve to be thrown away like that. And that's why we're here today, because you need to learn that there are consequences for actions like that. You can't just take what you want and expect there to be no price to pay. I sat back down, my chest tight, but a strange sense of relief washed over me. I had said everything I needed to say. It was out in the open now. Caitlin and Jeremy were no longer in control of this situation. I was. The judge looked at both Caitlin and Jeremy, her eyes sharp. "I've heard enough," she said, her voice final. "This case will be reviewed, and I will make my decision in the next few days. Until then, I suggest both parties refrain from any further attempts to settle this outside of the court. This matter is now in the hands of the court." She slammed her gavel down, and the room went silent. The tension in the air was almost palpable. As I walked out of the courtroom, I could feel my heart beating faster, but this time it wasn't fear. It was power. For the first time in a long time, I had taken control of my life again. I wasn't just waiting for something to happen. I was making it happen. Caitlin and Jeremy didn't know it yet, but their plan had already failed. They had underestimated me, and now they were going to pay the price for it. The next few days were filled with more waiting, but I wasn't worried anymore. I knew that I had done everything I could. I had fought back with everything I had, and I had exposed the truth. The house, the money, they didn't matter anymore. What mattered was that I had stood up for myself. And when the judge made her ruling, I knew exactly what would happen next. But if you want to know how this battle ends, how Caitlin and Jeremy lost everything they thought they had, stick around. Make sure you subscribe, because you won't want to miss how this story finally comes to a close. The waiting was the hardest part. The days felt like an eternity. After the courtroom hearing, I couldn't shake the feeling of a looming storm. I knew the judge's ruling was coming soon, but I didn't know how it would land. Would she side with Caitlin and Jeremy, or would she see the truth of what they'd done? I kept going through everything in my mind. The conversations, the evidence, the way they'd treated me. I had nothing left to lose, but I still found myself hoping that the judgment would be the final blow. They needed to realize the weight of their actions. It was early on the 5th morning after the hearing when the phone rang. I was sitting at the kitchen table, a cup of coffee in front of me, when I saw the number on the screen. It was Todd. "Dennis," Todd said as soon as I picked up. His voice sounded serious, but there was a note of triumph in it that I couldn't quite ignore. "The judge has made her decision." I felt a lump form in my throat, and Todd paused for a moment, letting the silence hang in the air before delivering the news. "She's ruled in your favor." My heart skipped a beat. I had been prepared for anything, prepared for them to drag this out for months, prepared for a ruling that might not go my way. But this was the moment I had been waiting for. This was the moment when everything I had fought for was finally mine again. "The house," Todd continued, "is officially yours. Caitlin and Jeremy are no longer entitled to any claim over it. The court has also awarded you full rights to all assets involved, including the property and its value. In addition, they are liable for all the legal fees related to this case." I let out a breath I didn't realize I was holding. Relief flooded through me, and for the first time in a long time I felt something I hadn't in years: peace. The battle was over. I had won. And Caitlin and Jeremy, they had lost everything they thought they were entitled to. They won't appeal?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "No," Todd said firmly. "There's no basis for an appeal. The evidence was clear. This ruling is final." I felt my chest tighten, but it wasn't with fear. It was with something else, something bittersweet. I had fought for this victory, but at what cost? "Thanks, Todd," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "You don't know how much this means to me." "No need to thank me, Dennis. You earned this. You stood up for yourself, and you didn't let them take anything from you. They'll be paying the price for what they did, but you're going to move on from this." I didn't know what to say. I just sat there for a moment, staring at the walls that had once seemed so empty, so full of memories of what I had lost. But now, with the victory in hand, I felt like I could finally breathe again. Take care of yourself, Todd added before hanging up. The phone call ended, but the moment lingered. I didn't know what the future would hold, but for the first time, I wasn't afraid. I wasn't looking over my shoulder, wondering if someone would come and take it all away again. Later that afternoon, as I sat in my living room, I heard a knock on the door. I already knew who it was before I opened it, Caitlin. She was standing on the doorstep, her face pale, her expression a mixture of anger and disbelief. She didn't say anything at first, just stared at me as if trying to gauge how I was going to react. I wasn't going to make this easy for her. Not anymore. "You lost," I said simply, not bothering with pleasantries. Her face twisted with frustration. "You don't understand, Dad. This isn't over. You can't just take everything from us." I shook my head. "I didn't take anything from you, Caitlin. You took it from me. You thought you could use me, manipulate me, sell me off like I didn't matter. But I'm not some pawn in your game. And now you've lost, I've won." Her eyes welled up with tears, but she wasn't going to get sympathy from me. Not this time. "You're making a mistake," she said, her voice shaking. "You're going to regret this." "I'm not going to regret standing up for myself," I said, my voice steady. "You and Jeremy made your choices, and now you have to live with them." She opened her mouth to say something else, but I wasn't going to listen. I turned and walked away, leaving her standing on the doorstep. I had done what I needed to do. It was over. The next few weeks passed in a haze. The legal documents were finalized, the house officially mine, and Caitlin and Jeremy had nowhere to turn. They had tried to tear everything apart, but in the end they lost. And I walked away with everything I needed, my peace, my dignity, and the house that I had built from the ground up. But even as I stood there looking out at the house, I couldn't help but feel a pang of sadness. This wasn't how I had imagined it all turning out. I had spent so many years doing everything for Caitlin, giving her everything she wanted, and now I had nothing left but the empty feeling that came with realizing the truth, that sometimes the people closest to you can hurt you the most. But that was in the past now, and as the sun began to set, casting a warm glow over the house, I finally allowed myself to feel something I hadn't in years: freedom. Freedom to live my life, freedom to rebuild, and freedom to move on from the people who had tried to tear me apart. If you want to know how this story finally ends, how Caitlin and Jeremy reacted when they realized the consequences of their actions, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. The final chapter is coming, and trust me, it's one you won't want to miss. The months that followed the court ruling felt surreal. The tension that had once defined every conversation, every interaction, slowly began to fade. I spent my days focusing on the things that mattered, repairing what had been broken, not just in my home but within myself. The house that had once felt like a prison now felt like a sanctuary. It was mine, completely mine again. I could finally breathe. Caitlin and Jeremy had tried to reach out a few times after the ruling, but I didn't take their calls. I didn't need to hear their apologies or their excuses anymore. I had fought for my right to be heard, to be treated with respect, and that fight had been worth every moment of hardship. It wasn't easy, though. The loneliness was overwhelming at times. I hadn't realized how much I had depended on Caitlin's presence in my life until it was gone. I didn't miss the betrayal, but I missed the daughter I once knew, the one who would come home after school, laugh at my terrible jokes, and share her dreams. That version of Caitlin was gone, replaced by someone I didn't recognize. But as much as the loss stung, I knew it was the right choice. I couldn't let her use me anymore. I couldn't let her and Jeremy continue to walk all over me. They had made their choices, and now I had to live with the consequences of those choices. It was a Saturday morning about 2 months after the ruling when I got a letter in the mail. This one was different from the others. It was handwritten, the ink smudged in places, as if whoever had written it had been in a rush. It wasn't from Caitlin's lawyer. It wasn't from anyone I expected. I opened it carefully. "Dear Dad, I know I don't have the right to ask you for anything, and I understand why you don't want to speak to me. But I need you to know something. I've been thinking about everything, and I know that I hurt you in a way I can never undo. I regret the choices I made more than I could ever explain. I was wrong. I was blinded by my own selfishness, and I took you for granted. I took everything you gave me and used it for my own gain, and I will carry that guilt with me forever. I don't expect you to forgive me, but I'm hoping that one day you will at least find it in your heart to know that I do love you, I miss you, and I'm sorry. Please know that I am trying to change, for myself and for the future. I hope that one day we can start over. Love, Caitlin. I sat there for a long time, the letter still in my hands. I wasn't sure what I had expected when I opened it, but it wasn't this. It wasn't an apology. Not really. Not the way I would have wanted it, the way I had dreamed about in my quiet moments. But it was the first step toward healing, I supposed. The first real acknowledgement of the hurt she had caused. But did I want to forgive her? Could I forgive her? It wasn't a question I had an answer to. Maybe I would in time. Maybe I wouldn't. All I knew was that the pain she had caused had changed me forever. I had learned a lesson in strength in standing up for myself, and that lesson was worth more than any apology. I put the letter down and walked to the window, looking out at the house I had built, the house that had witnessed so many years of my life. I had fought for this, and in doing so I had won something much bigger than just property or money. I had won my life back, my dignity, and most importantly, my peace. I didn't need to hear Caitlin's apology to know what I had to do, what I had learned. The truth was clear to me now. I wasn't going to allow anyone to take me for granted again, not Caitlin, not Jeremy, and certainly not anyone else who thought they could use me for their own gain. But I also knew that holding on to bitterness and anger wasn't the answer. That wasn't the kind of man I wanted to be. I wasn't going to let the past dictate my future. And maybe, just maybe, there was still room for me to heal, to forgive, but on my own terms. A few days later, I called Todd. I needed to tie up some loose ends regarding the paperwork for the house, but something else was on my mind. "Hey, Todd," I said when he picked up. "I've been thinking. I know Caitlin and I have a lot to work through, but I think I might want to move on. I'm not going to let this mess up the rest of my life. You know." Todd was silent for a moment, probably considering what I meant. Then he replied, his tone warm, "You've already come a long way, Dennis, and I think you're right. It's time to move forward. Whatever comes next, you've earned it." "I've learned a lot about myself," I said, feeling the weight of the words sink in, "and I'm ready to put it behind me." Todd chuckled. "That's the spirit. I'm proud of you, Dennis. It's not easy to come out on top after everything you've been through." "Thanks, Todd," I said. "You've been a big help through all this. I appreciate you." We hung up, and as I sat back in my chair, a sense of finality washed over me. The battle was over. The fight had been long, hard, and painful, but I had won, and now it was time to move forward. I wasn't sure what the future would hold. I didn't know if Caitlin and I would ever reconcile fully, but I knew one thing for sure. I had reclaimed my life. I had reclaimed my peace, and nothing would take that from me again. The house was quiet just like it had been for months, but now it felt different. It felt like home again, and I finally felt like myself again. The journey had been painful, but it had led me to a place I had been searching for: freedom. And that, I realized, was all that mattered.